The antiquarian bookshop smelled of decaying leather and forgotten dreams. Mira Chen had grown accustomed to the scent over the 3 years she'd worked there, cataloging the endless procession of dusty volumes that found their way through Mr. Castellan's door. But today, something was different. Today, the air carried a metallic tang, like copper pennies left in the rain. "Third floor," Mr. Castellan had said that morning, his roomy eyes awaiting hers. "Storage room at the end. There's a collection that came in last night. Estate sale. The usual sorting and cataloging, but—" He'd paused, his gnarled fingers trembling slightly as they gripped his coffee cup. "If you find anything unusual, anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, you come get me immediately. Understand?" Mira had nodded, thinking nothing of it. Mr. Castellan was old, superstitious, prone to strange warnings about particular books or artifacts. Once he'd refused to sell a first-edition Poe because he claimed he could hear whispering coming from between its pages. She'd learned to smile and nod. Now, standing in the cramped third-floor storage room, surrounded by towers of boxes emanating that strange metallic smell, she wished she'd asked more questions. The collection had belonged to a Professor Edmund Thorne, according to the manifest. Died 3 weeks ago. No living relatives. His entire estate liquidated to pay debts. Standard tragic story. The boxes contained what you'd expect from an academic's lifetime accumulation: geological surveys, topographical studies, journals filled with cramped handwriting, and maps. So many maps. Mira had always loved maps. As a child, she'd spent hours tracing her fingers along the colored lines, imagining the places they represented. Mountains she'd never climb, oceans she'd never cross, cities she'd never visit. Maps were promises, she'd thought then. Promises of somewhere else, somewhere better. She pulled out the first roll of paper from the nearest box. It crackled as she unrolled it on the sorting table, the aged vellum threatening to split. A map of the American Southwest, circa 1880s, showing railway routes and mining claims. Beautiful, valuable, but unremarkable. The second map showed maritime routes around Cape Horn. The third, a survey of Scottish Highlands. The fourth, a street plan of Prague from the 1920s. It was the fifth map that changed everything. At first glance, it looked like any other antique map. The paper was older than the others, parchment rather than vellum, with the characteristic brown spotting of centuries-old documents. The lines were drawn in faded ink, some in red, others in black, a few in what looked like gold leaf. But as Mira smoothed it out, she realized she didn't recognize any of the geography. She'd studied cartography in college before dropping out to help care for her sick mother. She knew her maps, could identify most major regions at a glance. This showed none of them. The land masses were wrong, the coastlines alien. Rivers wound in impossible spirals. Mountain ranges formed perfect geometric patterns that no geological process could create. And there were roads, hundreds of them. Thousands, rendered in that fading red ink. They twisted and crossed and doubled back on themselves in ways that defied logic. Some led to cities marked with symbols she'd never seen in any cartographic tradition. Others simply ended in blank spaces, as if the travelers who'd walked them had simply vanished. In the corner, in that same cramped handwriting she'd seen in Thorne's journals, was a note. "The Forgotten Roads. Do not follow. Do not remember. Burn this." Despite the warning, despite the chill that crept up her spine, Mira found herself leaning closer. There was something compelling about the map, something that tugged at a part of her mind she'd forgotten existed. The longer she looked, the more the lines seemed to shift and writhe, rearranging themselves into new configurations. And then she saw it. In the corner of the map, barely visible, a street she recognized. Maple Avenue, her street, The street where her apartment building stood in this very city, rendered in perfect detail on a map that showed no other familiar geography. The red line of a forgotten road ran right through it, connecting her building to a city marked with a symbol that looked like an eye within a spiral. Her hands were shaking now. This was impossible. The map was clearly ancient, centuries old at least. There was no way it could show a street that had only been paved in the 1950s, an apartment building that had only been constructed in the 1970s. Unless the map wasn't showing the past. Unless it was showing something entirely different. She heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly rolled the map up, tucking it under her arm. Mr. Castellan appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Did you find it?" "Find what?" "The map. The one that shouldn't exist." He stepped into the room, moving slowly, as if afraid of startling something. "Thorn called me the day before he died. He was raving, barely coherent, said he'd found the roads, that he'd walked them, said they were older than the world, that they connected places that never been and never would be. He begged me not to accept his collection when he died, but his executor insisted. Legal obligations." "Mr. Castellan, this is crazy. It's just an old map. Is your street on it?" Mira froze. "How did you know?" "Because mine was on it too. 40 years ago, when I was foolish and curious, when I first touched that cursed thing." He reached out, not touching the map, but gesturing toward it. "The roads remember everyone who looks at them, and once they remember you, they never forget. They'll call to you. In dreams, in waking moments, you'll see them everywhere, in cracks in the sidewalk, in the patterns of frost on windows, in the way shadows fall at sunset. And one day, if you're not careful, you'll step onto one of those roads and find yourself somewhere else entirely." "This is insane. You're talking about it like it's real, like these roads actually exist. Don't they?" Mr. Castellan's eyes were sad, knowing. "Look at the map again, Mira. Really look. Tell me what you see." Against her better judgment, she unrolled it again. The lines had changed. She was certain of it. The road that had run through Maple Avenue now extended further, branching out into new paths. One led to what looked like a forest, marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Another wound toward a mountain that couldn't possibly exist, not with those angles, not with the way it seemed to fold it on itself. And at the very center of the map, in a place that had been blank before, new words had appeared in that cramped handwriting. "The threshold waits. The cartographer remembers. Come home." "Who's the cartographer?" Mira whispered. "No one knows. Some say he's the one who made the first roads, back before the world settled into the shape we know. Others say he's something older, something that existed in the spaces between places, and the roads are just his way of reaching into our reality." Mr. Castellan shook his head. "What matters is that he's real, and his roads are real, and people who walk them don't always come back." "Thorn walked them." "Yes, and you see what happened to him." "What did happen to him?" "The manifest just said natural causes." Mr. Castellan was quiet for a long moment. "They found him in his study, sitting at his desk with that map in front of him, dead for 3 days, the coroner said. But Mira," he leaned closer, his voice dropping to bitterly whisper, "they covered him in dust, red dust, like nothing found anywhere in this city. It was in his hair, his clothes under his fingernails, and his eyes were open, staring at the map. And they say in the moment before they closed them, they could see something reflected there, a road stretching away into impossible distance, a road still waiting for travelers."
Mira took the map home that night, despite Mr. Castellan's protests. She told herself she just wanted to study it more carefully, to figure out the trick behind it. There had to be a rational explanation. Perhaps Thorn had been a forger, skilled at creating convincing fakes. Perhaps the appearance of Maple Avenue was just coincidence. Or perhaps she'd imagined it, her mind playing tricks in that dim storage room. But when she spread the map out on her kitchen table under the harsh LED lights, there was no doubt. Maple Avenue was there, rendered in perfect detail. She could see her building, could even make out the oak tree that grew in front of it, the one that shed leaves all over her car every fall. She opened her laptop and began to research Professor Edmund Thorne. The obituaries were sparse, perfunctory. He'd been a geologist, specializing in unusual rock formations and geological anomalies. He'd published extensively in the 1980s and 90s, then abruptly stopped. His last paper, published in an obscure journal in 1997, was titled Evidence of Non-Euclidean Geometry in Natural Formations, a Study of Impossible Landscapes. She found the paper through her university library's database and started reading. It was dense, technical, filled with mathematics she barely understood. But the core thesis was clear. Thorne believed there were places in the world where normal geometry didn't apply, where space folded in on itself in ways that couldn't exist according to conventional physics. And he believed these places were connected by pathways, roads that existed in multiple locations simultaneously. The paper had been rejected by the academic community, dismissed as pseudoscience. Thorne had been quietly forced into early retirement. The last comment on the paper from a peer reviewer read simply, "This is not geology. This is madness." Mira closed her laptop and looked at the map again. In the dim light of her kitchen, the lines seemed to glow faintly, pulsing with their own inner luminescence. She reached out to touch one of the roads, and the moment her finger made contact with the paper, the world lurched. It was like falling and flying at the same time, a sensation of movement without moving. The kitchen blurred around her, walls stretching and warping. For a moment, she saw double, triple, her kitchen overlaid with other places, other spaces. A forest of trees with bark that looked like human skin. A desert where the sand ran upward instead of down. A city built of glass and shadows, where buildings twisted into shapes that hurt to perceive. Then, as quickly as it began, it stopped. She was back in her kitchen, alone, her fingers still touching the map, but she could feel it now, a pulling sensation in her chest, like a hook had caught somewhere deep inside her and was tugging, gently but insistently, toward the door. She knew with absolute certainty that if she went outside right now, she would see it. The road, the forgotten road that ran through Maple Avenue, invisible to everyone else but clear as day to her. And if she stepped onto it, if she started walking, she would end up somewhere that wasn't on any conventional map. The smart thing would be to burn the map, just as Thorne's note had suggested, to forget she'd ever seen it, to go back to her normal life of cataloging old books and dreaming of places she'd never visit. But Mira had spent her entire life being smart, being careful. She dropped out of college to care for her mother. She'd taken the safe job, the stable job. She'd dated safe men and lived in a safe apartment and never taken risks, never followed her dreams. And where had it gotten her? She was 32 years old, alone, drowning in student debt from a degree she'd never finished, working in a dusty bookshop for minimum wage. The map was offering her something else, something dangerous perhaps, possibly deadly, but also something real, something that mattered in a way her careful, safe life never had. She rolled up the map and tucked it into her backpack. Then she walked to her bedroom and started packing. Maple Avenue looked the same as always in the gray light of pre-dawn. Mira stood on the sidewalk outside her building, backpack slung over her shoulder, the rolled map in her hand. A few cars passed, early commuters heading to work. A jogger went by, earbuds in, oblivious to her. To their eyes, she knew she was just another person standing on the street. They couldn't see what she saw. The road had appeared the moment she'd stepped outside. It overlaid Maple Avenue like a double exposure, a path made of packed red earth that glowed faintly in the dim light. It ran down the center of the street, ignoring traffic lanes and sidewalks, following its own ancient course. Where it intersected with the real world, things looked slightly wrong. Buildings that had stood for decades seemed to waver, as if they weren't quite solid. The oak tree in front of her building had a strange quality to it, its branches reaching out in directions that shouldn't be possible. The road called to her, a wordless invitation. She could feel it in her bones and her blood. "Walk me," it seemed to whisper. "Follow me to the places between places, to the lands that exist in the margins of reality." She took a breath and stepped onto it. The world didn't change dramatically, not at first. She was still on Maple Avenue, still in her city, but everything felt different, muffled somehow, as if she'd stepped behind a thick pane of glass. The sounds of the city were distant, dreamlike. The colors were slightly off, too vibrant in some places, washed out in others. She started walking, following the red road as it wound down Maple Avenue. With each step, the city became less real. Buildings she passed every day looked strange now, their windows reflecting scenes that weren't there, glimpses of other places, other times. She saw a desert vista reflected in the window of the corner store, an ocean, vast and dark, in the glass door of a restaurant, a forest of silver trees in the windshield of a parked car. The road led her to a place that couldn't exist. It was a crossroads of sorts, where 5 roads met in a perfect star pattern. In the center of the star, someone had built a structure, or something had grown there. It was hard to tell which was. It looked like a gazebo crossed with a spider web, made of materials that shifted between stone and wood and something organic and pulsing. And standing in front of it was a woman.
She was old, ancient even, her skin deeply lined and weathered. But her eyes were young, sharp, filled with an intelligence that seemed to look through Mira rather than at her. She wore clothes that seemed to be from a dozen different eras, a Victorian coat over a medieval tunic over pants that looked almost modern. And she held a staff made of twisted wood that sprouted living leaves at its tip. "You're early," the woman said, her voice rough like stones grinding together. "Most take years to find the roads after they see the map. You found them in hours." "Who are you?" Mira asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am keeper of the third crossing. I maintain the threshold between the roads and the places they connect. And you are Mira Chen, cartography student, dreamer of distant places, seeker of somewhere else." "How do you know my name?" "The roads know you. They've known you since you first loved maps as a child. They've been waiting for you." The keeper stepped closer, leaning on her staff. "The question is, why have you come? Is it curiosity, desperation, or something deeper?" Mira thought about that. "I want to understand. The map, the roads, all of this. Why does it exist? What's the purpose?" "Ah, a seeker of knowledge, then." The keeper smiled, revealing teeth that were slightly too sharp. "Very well. I will tell you what I know, which is not everything, but more than most. Sit." She gestured, and the air itself seemed to solidify into a bench. Mira sat, too fascinated now to be afraid. "The roads are older than the world you know," the keeper began. "They were created, or perhaps discovered, the distinction is unclear, by the one you call the cartographer. He was the first to realize that reality is not as solid as it appears, that beneath the surface of what we perceive, there are pathways, connections between places that should not be connected. He mapped these pathways, and in doing so, he made them real. But why? What was he trying to accomplish? Escape, perhaps? Or exploration, or simply the need to create, to impose order on the chaos of possibility? She shrugged. His motives are his own. What matters is that the roads exist and they serve a purpose. They connect the forgotten places, lands that were dreamed but never existed, cities that were built and then erased, worlds that branched off from this one at critical moments and went their own way. The roads are how you travel between them. And the map? Why does it show my street? The map doesn't show locations in your world, child. It shows potential. It shows where the roads might emerge given the right observer. You saw Maple Avenue because you are connected to that place and the roads recognize that connection. Another person looking at the same map might see their own street, their own home. The map reflects the observer as much as it reveals the roads. Mira pulled out the map, unrolling it on her lap. Sure enough, it had changed again. Maple Avenue was still there, but now there were other locations marked as well. She saw what looked like the park where she had played as a child, the hospital where her mother had died, the library where she'd spent countless hours studying maps and dreaming of elsewhere. The roads remember your important places, the locations that shaped you, that made you who you are. These are your anchors to the world you came from. As long as you can see them on the map, you can find your way back. What happens if they disappear? Then you become one of the forgotten. Those who walk the roads forever, unable to return, unable to stay in any one place. They wander between worlds, seeking something they can no longer remember, driven by a hunger that can never be satisfied. The keeper's expression darkened. Professor Thorne was close to that fate when he died. He had walked the roads for too long, seen too many forgotten places. His anchors were fading. When they found him, he was more ghost than man. Why are you telling me this? Why help me? Because you have a choice ahead of you, Mira Chen. You can turn back now, return to your world, burn the map, and forget you ever saw the roads. You will lose the magic, the wonder, but you will be safe. You will live a normal life. The keeper paused. Or you can walk further. You can explore the forgotten places, see the worlds that might have been. But if you do, you risk becoming like Thorne. The roads are addictive. The more you walk them, the harder it becomes to stop. Eventually, your world will seem gray and lifeless compared to the wonders of the roads. And when that happens, when your anchors begin to fade, it may be too late to return. Mira looked at the map, at the glowing lines connecting impossible places. She thought about her small apartment, her dead-end job, her safe and predictable life. She thought about the wonder in her chest, the sense of possibility that had been dead for so long. "I want to keep walking," she said. The keeper nodded, as if she'd expected this answer. "Then take this." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small compass, but instead of pointing north, it spun slowly, pointing in different directions on the map. "This will help you navigate. Follow it, and you can explore the roads safely for a time. But remember, Mira Chen, the roads exact a price. The more wonders you see, the more ordinary life will feel. Choose your path carefully." Mira took the compass, feeling its weight in her hand. It was warm, almost alive. "Where should I go first?" "Where does your heart lead you?" She looked at the map again, at the countless roads branching off into unknown territories. One caught her eye, a path that led to a symbol she hadn't noticed before, a library rendered in gold leaf surrounded by stars. "There," she said, pointing. The keeper smiled. "The infinite library, a good choice for a seeker of knowledge. Follow the road that runs past the oak tree. Walk until the stars change. And remember, In the forgotten places, not everything is as it seems. Trust your map, trust your compass, but most of all, trust yourself.
The road to the library ran through landscapes that couldn't exist. Mira walked past a forest where the trees grew upside down, their roots reaching toward a sky that was below instead of above. She crossed a desert where the sand was made of tiny stars, each green glowing with inner light. She traversed a bridge made of frozen lightning, spanning a chasm that seemed to drop into infinity. The compass guided her true, its needle always pointing toward her destination, and the map changed as she walked, adding new details, new roads, as if it were drawing itself in real time based on her journey. After what felt like hours, but might have been days, time ran strangely on the forgotten roads. She saw it rising in the distance. The infinite library was impossible to fully perceive. It was too large, its architecture too complex. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its towers reaching in directions that had no names. One moment it looked like a Gothic cathedral, all spires and flying buttresses. The next it resembled a massive tree, its branches heavy with buildings instead of leaves. Then it was a crystal formation, geometric and alien. And sometimes, for just a moment, it looked like all these things at once. The road led directly to its entrance, a door carved from a single piece of obsidian, covered in symbols that shifted and rearranged themselves as she watched. As she approached, the door swung open silently, revealing darkness beyond. Mira stepped inside. The darkness lasted only a moment, then light bloomed around her. She stood in a space that was simultaneously tiny and vast. The walls were lined with shelves that stretched up into infinity, each shelf packed with books, scrolls, tablets, and objects she had no names for. The shelves didn't obey normal geometry. Some curved in impossible ways, others seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Staircases spiraled in directions that hurt her eyes to follow. Bridges made of pure light connected distant sections. And everywhere, there were books. "Welcome, traveler." The voice came from above. Mira looked up and saw a figure floating down toward her, or perhaps the floor was rising to meet them. It was hard to tell. They were humanoid, but indistinct, their form constantly shifting as if they couldn't quite decide what shape to take. One moment they appeared as an old man with white beard, the next as a young woman with sharp features, then as something that was neither or both. "I am the librarian," the figure said as they settled, or she did, having apparently decided on a female form for the moment. "Keeper of forgotten knowledge, curator of lost stories, guardian of the books that were never written and the histories that never happened." "This place is incredible," Mira breathed, turning in a slow circle. "Yes, and it is yours to explore if you wish. But first, you must understand the rules." The librarian gestured, and a book appeared in her hands, not pulled from a shelf, but seemingly conjured from nothing. "The infinite library contains all knowledge that has been forgotten, books that were written and lost, stories that were told and never recorded, histories of worlds that branched off from yours and went their own way, futures that might have been but never were. It is a repository of possibility, of everything that exists in the margins of reality." "Can I read them?" "You can, but be warned, knowledge from the forgotten places can be dangerous. Once you learn something here, you cannot unlearn it. Some knowledge changes you fundamentally. Some knowledge is meant to stay forgotten." The librarian opened the book in her hands, revealing pages covered in text that seemed to writhe and shift. "I have seen people go mad from reading the wrong book, their minds unable to contain the contradictions they discovered. I have seen others become so enamored with the might-have-beens that they can no longer live in the world that is." "Then why show them to people at all?" "Because knowledge, even dangerous knowledge, is sacred. It deserves to be preserved,
to be accessible to those who seek it, and because sometimes the forgotten things contain answers that the remembered world desperately needs. The librarian closed the book and it vanished. "What is it you seek, Mira Chen? What knowledge do you hope to find here?" Mira thought about that. She thought about the map, about Professor Thorne, about the cartographer who had made the roads. "I want to understand why I can see the roads, why the map revealed itself to me. What connects me to the forgotten places?" The librarian smiled, a gesture that transformed her shifting face into something almost warm. "Ah, a seeker of self-knowledge, the most dangerous kind, but also the most valuable. Come." She turned and walked deeper into the library, and Mira followed. They passed shelves containing books bound in materials she'd never seen, glass that sung when touched, metal that flowed like water, leather that might have been scales or might have been something else entirely. They crossed bridges where below and above reversed with each step, and finally they reached a section that felt different from the rest. The shelves here were darker, older, the books dust-covered and ancient. A single table sat in the center of the space, and on it lay a book already open. "Your book," the librarian said simply. "The story of Mira Chen, written in the language of the roads. Read it, and you will understand." Mira approached the table cautiously. The book was bound in red leather, or was it the same red earth that made up the roads? She couldn't tell. The pages were thick, handmade, covered in text that seemed to shift between languages. But as she focused, the words clarified, becoming readable. She began to read, and as she did, memories flooded back. Memories she'd forgotten, or perhaps memories she'd never consciously had. She was 6 years old, sick with fever, delirious. In her fevered dreams, she'd walked roads of burning light, met creatures that existed between states of being. Her mother had found her standing at the window at 3 a.m, claiming she could see pathways in the sky. She was 12, exploring the old quarry on the edge of town where she'd been forbidden to go. She'd found a cave, and in the cave, markings on the wall that looked exactly like the symbols on her map. She traced them with her fingers and felt something shift, some fundamental change in her perception. She ran home terrified and tried to forget what she'd felt. She was 17, her mother newly diagnosed, the future she'd planned crumbling around her. She dreamed of roads every night for weeks, pathways that led away from her pain, away from her responsibility. She'd woken up each morning with red dust under her nails, though she never remembered walking anywhere. The roads had always been calling to her. She had always been able to see them, or nearly see them, perceiving them at the edge of her awareness. And she had always chosen to turn away, to ignore them, to live in the safe, solid world. Until now, until Professor Thorne's mat had forced her to acknowledge what she'd been denying her entire life. "You are a walker," the librarian said softly. "One of the few people born with the ability to perceive the forgotten roads, to travel them safely. It is a rare gift and a heavy burden. The cartographer himself was the first walker. There have been others throughout history, though they are few and far between. They are the ones who find their way to the places between places, who bridge the gap between what is and what might be. Why me? That I cannot tell you. Some are born walkers. Others become them through trauma or transcendence, but all have one thing in common. They are people who stand between worlds, who never quite fit in the reality they were given. They are dreamers who dream too well, searchers who seek too deeply. They are the ones who look at a map and see not just what is, but what could be." Mira looked down at the book again. The final page showed her standing at the crossroads where she'd met the keeper, holding the compass and the map. But there were 2 versions of her rendered in the illustration. One turned back, returning to Maple Avenue, to her safe life. The other walked forward, deeper into the forgotten places. "What happens if I keep walking?" she asked. "You continue to explore. You see wonders beyond imagining. You learn truth that most humans will never know. And gradually, very gradually, you begin to forget the world you came from. The roads claim you, and you become one of the forgotten, wandering forever between possibilities. And if I go back? You return to your ordinary life, but you will always remember what you saw. The forgotten roads will haunt your dreams, and you will spend the rest of your days wondering about the path not taken, the worlds you didn't see. So, either way, I lose something? Yes, that is the price of being a walker. You must choose between wonder and belonging, between exploration and home. The librarian placed a hand on Mira's shoulder, the touch surprisingly solid despite her shifting form. But know this, the choice is not permanent. The roads will always be there, invisible to most, but present nonetheless. If you return now, you can always come back, if you have the courage. And if you walk further now, you can still find your way home, as long as your anchors remain strong. Mira thought about Maple Avenue, about her small apartment, about Mr. Castellan and the dusty bookshop, about her mother, buried now for 3 years, and the life she'd built in the aftermath of that loss. It wasn't much of a life, perhaps, but it was hers. It was real. And yet, she thought about the forest of upside-down trees, about the desert of stars, about the infinite library with its impossible shelves. She thought about the cartographer, whoever he was, mapping the forgotten places. She thought about Professor Thorne, who had walked the roads until they consumed him. "How do I keep my anchor strong?" she asked. The librarian smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "By remembering why they matter, by holding on to the people and places that made you who you are, by not letting the wonder of the roads eclipse the wonder of the world you came from." She gestured to the book. "Your story, written in the language of the roads. When you feel yourself forgetting, when the roads start to consume you, read it. Remember who Mira Chen is and why she matters." Mira closed the book and picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, solid and real in her hands. "I want to see more. Not forever, not until I'm forgotten. But I'm not ready to go back yet. There's so much I haven't seen." "Then walk. Explore the forgotten places. See the worlds that might have been. Learn what you need to learn. But promise me this. When you feel your anchors beginning to fade, when Maple Avenue starts to seem less real than the roads, you will turn back. You will return home." "I promise." Mira spent what felt like weeks exploring the forgotten places, though time was slippery on the roads and she couldn't be sure how much was passing in her own world. She walked through a city built entirely of music, where buildings were constructed from crystallized songs and the streets hummed with melodies. She visited a garden where plants grew into mathematical shapes, their flowers blooming in perfect spirals and fractals. She crossed a bridge made of frozen moments, where she could step into any instant of time that had been forgotten and live it again. And each place taught her something new about the nature of reality, about the thin barrier between what is and what might be. And each place appeared on her map as she visited it, the red lines connecting them in an ever-growing network. But she never forgot her promise. Each night, when night came, which wasn't always clear on the roads, she would take out her book and read about Mira Chen, the girl who loved maps, the woman who had chosen safety over adventure until one day she couldn't anymore. And she would check her map to make sure Maple Avenue was still there, still clear, still waiting for her return. It was during one of these checks that she noticed something new.
a road she hadn't seen before, leading to a location marked with a symbol that made her breath catch. A tower, rendered in intricate detail, with a pen crossed with a compass at its peak. The Cartographer's Tower. She felt a thrill of fear and excitement. This was the source, the beginning, the place where the roads had been born, or discovered, or whatever the right word was, the home of the being who had made all of this possible. She consulted her compass. The needle spun wildly for a moment, then locked onto a direction that seemed to lead away from all the roads she knew. This would be a long journey through territory she hadn't yet explored. She began to walk. The road to the tower led through the strangest landscapes yet. She passed through a place where gravity was a suggestion rather than a law, where she walked on walls and ceilings as easily as floors. She crossed a plain where the ground was made of solidified time, and she could see the past and future existing simultaneously beneath her feet. She navigated a maze of mirrors that reflected not her image, but her possibilities, versions of herself that had made different choices, lived different lives. In one mirror, she saw herself as a successful cartographer, traveling the world, mapping real places instead of forgotten ones. In another, she was still caring for her mother, who in that reality had survived her illness. In a third, she had never touched the map, had never seen the roads, and had lived and died ordinary and content. She forced herself to look away from that last mirror. The roads had shown her too much now. She could never go back to being that version of herself, even if she wanted to. After what felt like days of walking, the tower appeared on the horizon. It rose from a landscape of red earth, the same red earth that made up the roads themselves. The tower was impossibly tall, stretching up until its peak disappeared into clouds that seemed to exist in a different dimension. It was built from a material that shifted between stone and parchment, as if the tower itself were made of maps given physical form.
As she approached, she realized the tower was covered in markings. Not decorative elements, but maps. Thousands of them, millions perhaps, carved and painted and etched into every surface. Some showed places she recognized from her journey. Others depicted locations she'd never seen, worlds that seemed even stranger than the ones she'd visited. The entrance was a simple door, human-sized, almost disappointing in its ordinariness. But when she pushed it open, she found herself in a space that defied description. The interior of the tower was a single, vast chamber that seemed to contain infinity. The walls curved away in impossible directions, covered floor to ceiling with maps of every size and style. Some were ancient, drawn on animal hide or carved into stone. Others were modern, printed on glossy paper or displayed on screens that floated unsupported in the air. And some were made of materials she had no names for, light and shadow, crystallized sound woven from strands of pure possibility. In the center of it all, at a desk that seemed to be made from a cross-section of every road that had ever existed, sat the cartographer. He was not what she expected. She'd imagined someone ancient, otherworldly, perhaps not entirely human. But the figure who looked up at her approach was a man who appeared to be in his 50s, with dark skin, graying hair, and eyes that held both immense weariness and fierce intelligence. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt that would have looked ordinary on any street in her world. "Mira Chen," he said, his voice warm and familiar as if they'd known each other for years. "I've been expecting you, though I confess you arrived sooner than I anticipated. Most walkers take years to find their way here, if they ever do." "You know who I am?" "Of course. I know every walker. I've met most of them at one time or another. We are a small family, scattered across time and possibility." He gestured to a chair that appeared beside his desk. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Mira sat, feeling oddly calm.
Despite the strangeness of the tower, despite the impossibility of everything she'd seen, this felt right, like coming home after a long journey. "I have questions," she began, "and I have answers. Some of them at least." The cartographer smiled. "But first, let me ask you one. Why did you come here? What do you hope to find?" "The truth, I suppose. About the roads, about why they exist, about my place in all of this?" "The truth." The cartographer leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "That's a dangerous thing to seek on the Forgotten Roads. Truth here is not what it is in your world. Here, truth is fluid, multiple, contradictory. But I will tell you what I can." He stood and walked to one of the maps on the wall, a vast thing that seemed to show the entire network of forgotten roads in one impossible image. "I was once like you, a person who didn't quite fit in the world I was born into. I could see the cracks in reality, the places where the facade grew thin. And I wondered what lay beyond those cracks. So I began to explore." "When was this?" "Time is difficult on the roads. In your world's terms, I suppose I began my explorations in the late 1700s, but I've lived centuries since then, moving between worlds, existing in the spaces between moments. Age doesn't touch you the same way when you walk the roads regularly." Mira's eyes widened. "You've been doing this for over 200 years?" "At least. Perhaps longer. I've lost track of exactly when I began." He traced his finger along one of the roads on the map. "What I discovered is that reality is not singular. Your world, the world you think of as real, is just one possibility among infinite others. And between these possibilities, there are spaces, forgotten places, discarded worlds, dreams that were never quite dreamed. The roads connect these spaces. They allow travel between what is and what might have been." "Did you create them?" "No, they existed before me, I think. Or perhaps they came into existence the moment I began to perceive them. Cause and effect are tangled on the roads." He turned back to her. "What I did was map them. I spent decades, centuries, traveling every road I could find, documenting them, creating charts and guides. And in doing so, I made them more real, more accessible. My maps became pathways for others to follow." "Like Professor Thorne?" The cartographer's expression darkened. "Yes, like Thorne. Like many others who found my maps and walked my roads. Some returned home safely, enriched by what they'd seen. Others," he shook his head. "The roads are addictive, Mira. The wonders they contain, the impossible beauty of the forgotten places, it can consume you, make you forget why you valued the ordinary world. Thorne walked too far, stayed too long. By the time he tried to return, his anchors had faded to almost nothing. The keeper warned me about that. She said I needed to keep my anchors strong to remember my connection to my world." "The keeper's wise. She's been maintaining her crossing for longer than I've been mapping the roads." The cartographer returned to his desk and pulled out a map, not one from his walls, but a new one, blank parchment that seemed to glow with inner light. "Which brings me to why you're really here. Not for answers. You've already learned most of what I could tell you. No, you're here because you need to make a choice." "What kind of choice?" "Whether to return to your world or to stay on the roads, to be Mira Chen of Maple Avenue or to become something else. A walker like me, existing between worlds, exploring forever." He laid the blank map on the desk between them. "This is for you if you choose to stay. A map that will grow as you explore, that will chart territories even I haven't seen. You have the gift, Mira. You could be a great explorer, a cartographer of forgotten places. You could spend centuries seeing wonders that no one else will ever witness. Mira looked at the blank map, feeling its pull, its promise. Then she looked down at her own map, the one she'd been carrying since the beginning. She unrolled it and examined it carefully. Maple Avenue was still there, but it was fainter now, less distinct than it had been. The oak tree was barely visible. Her apartment building was starting to blur at the edges. Her anchors were fading. "How long have I been gone?" she asked quietly. The cartographer checked a device on his desk that seemed to measure something other than time. "In your world, 3 days. Here on the roads, perhaps a month, perhaps longer. Time flows differently in the forgotten places." 3 days. Only 3 days, and already her connection to home was weakening. If she stayed much longer, would she even remember why Maple Avenue mattered? Would she become like Thorne, sitting in a study with a map she could no longer read, covered in red dust from roads she could no longer leave? "I want to see more," she said slowly, But you're not ready to give up your world. Not yet." The cartographer nodded. "That's wise. Wisdom that Thorne lacked, that many walkers lack. They fall in love with the impossible and forget the value of the ordinary. I don't think I'll ever be ready to give it up completely. My world, I mean, it's where I come from. It's what made me who I am."
Then you should return. He rolled up the blank map and handed it to her anyway. "Take this with you. When you're home, it will show you the roads from your world, the places you can walk to from Maple Avenue and return from safely. You can still explore, still see wonders, but you'll do it carefully, maintaining your connection to home." Mira took the map, feeling the weight of the choice she was making, not to give up the roads entirely, but not to lose herself in them either, to exist between worlds as the cartographer did, but never forgetting which world was truly hers. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you walk the roads for centuries without forgetting?" "I have my own anchors, places in various worlds that matter to me, people I've known and loved. And I have my purpose, to map the forgotten places, to document what would otherwise be lost. That gives me reason to return, to maintain my connection to reality." He smiled. "And occasionally, I meet someone like you, a new walker, someone who reminds me why the roads matter, why they're worth preserving. Those meetings anchor me more than anything else. Will you see me again? Perhaps, if you keep walking, if you continue to explore, our paths may cross. The roads are vast, but those who truly understand them tend to find each other eventually." He stood and walked her to the door. "Go home, Mira Chen. Rest. Remember who you are. And then when you're ready, walk again. The roads will always be waiting." The journey back was faster than the journey out, as if the roads themselves understood her urgency. She retraced her steps through the mirror maze, across the plain of frozen time, through the place where gravity was optional. Each location seemed less wondrous now, tainted by her worry about her fading anchors. When she finally reached the Keeper's Crossing, the old woman was waiting for her. "You're cutting it close. Another day or two when you might not have been able to find your way back." "I know. I can feel it, like Maple Avenue is slipping away from me, becoming less real." "Then run, child. Run back to your world, and when you get there, embrace it. Walk your ordinary streets, sleep in your ordinary bed, live your ordinary life. Let the mundane world soak back into you, reminding you why it matters."
Mira didn't need to be told twice. She broke into a run, following the red road as it led back toward her city. The forgotten places fell away behind her. The impossible landscapes faded. The strange stars were replaced by her familiar sky. And then she was back on Maple Avenue, standing in front of her apartment building, the oak tree solid and real before her. The red road was invisible again, though she knew it was still there, waiting beneath the surface of reality. She stumbled inside, up the stairs to her apartment. Her keys were where she'd left them. The dishes in her sink were the same ones she'd left 3 days ago. Everything was exactly as she'd remembered it. She collapsed on her couch and slept for 16 hours straight. The next morning, Mira called in sick to work. Then, she spent the entire day doing the most ordinary things she could think of. She did laundry, she went grocery shopping, she cleaned her apartment, she called her aunt, her mother's sister, the only family she had left, and talked about nothing important for an hour. Each mundane action felt like reclaiming a piece of herself, reinforcing her anchors. By the evening, when she finally looked at her map again, Maple Avenue was sharp and clear, the oak tree rendered in perfect detail. She'd done it. She'd walked the forgotten roads and returned without being consumed. But she hadn't forgotten. Every time she looked out her window, she could see the faint shimmer of the red road running down Maple Avenue. Every time she saw a map, any map, she remembered the infinite library and the cartographer's tower. The ordinary world would never be quite ordinary again. The next day, she went back to work. Mr. Castellan looked relieved to see her. 3 days. You were gone 3 days. I was worried you'd become one of the forgotten. I almost did, but I came back. And the map? I still have it. Both of them, actually. She pulled out the blank map the cartographer had given her. It wasn't blank anymore. It showed Maple Avenue and the immediate roads branching off from it. Safe paths she could walk without risking losing herself. Mr. Castellan studied her for a long moment. You've changed. I can see it in your eyes. You've seen things that would drive most people mad. Yes, but I also came back. That's what matters. He nodded slowly. Then let me give you something. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small leather journal. I kept this after my own journey, decades ago. It contains notes on the roads I walked, the places I saw. Perhaps it will help you as you explore. Consider it a gift from one walker to another. Mira took the journal, touched by the gesture. You were a walker too? Once, a long time ago. I walked the roads for 3 years before I finally came back. It nearly cost me everything. My wife, my sanity, my place in this world. But I made it back, and I chose to stay, to anchor myself here completely. He smiled sadly. I sometimes wonder what I might have seen if I'd kept walking. But I don't regret my choice. This world, ordinary as it is, has been enough for me. Do you ever see the roads anymore? Occasionally, in dreams mostly. They never completely leave you once you've walked them. But I've made my peace with that. And I found my purpose here, helping others find the knowledge they seek, even if it's not as dramatic as the infinite library. Mira returned to her cataloging work, but her mind was already planning her next journey. Not immediately. She needed more time to strengthen her anchors, to make sure her connection to home was solid. But soon,
She would walk the forgotten roads again. She would see more wonders, explore more impossible places. But she would always come back. She would exist between worlds, as the cartographer did, carrying the knowledge of what lay beyond the ordinary while still living within it. That evening, she spread both maps on her kitchen table.
the ancient one from Professor Thorne's collection and the new one from the Cartographer. They showed different things, different perspectives on the same fundamental truth. The forgotten roads existed. They connected impossible places, and she was one of the rare few who could walk them safely. She took out Mr. Castellan's journal and began to read. His handwriting was shaky but legible, and his accounts of the places he'd visited were fascinating. He'd walked to a city of bells, where every building chimed with its own unique tone. He'd visited a garden where emotions grew as flowers. He'd met the keeper at her crossing just as Mira had, and received similar warnings about the addictive nature of the roads. On the last page of the journal, he'd written, "I returned today. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, turning my back on wonder, on possibility, on all the roads I haven't yet walked. But I remembered Mary's face and the life we'd built together, and I realized that some anchors are worth holding on to, even if it means giving up the infinite. To any walker who reads this, choose carefully. The roads offer transcendence, but ordinary life offers love. Both are valuable, both are real. And if you're very careful, very wise, perhaps you can have a little of both." Mira closed the journal and looked out her window at Maple Avenue. A few cars passed by, a couple walked their dog. Ordinary life continuing, oblivious to the forgotten roads running beneath it all. She smiled. Mr. Castellan was right. She could have both, the wonder of the roads and the comfort of home. It would take discipline, careful planning, and constant awareness of her anchors. But it was possible. She picked up a pen and opened to a blank page in Mr. Castellan's journal. Then she began to write her own account, starting with the day she'd found the map in the storage room. This would be her legacy, her contribution to the small community of walkers. When she was gone, decades from now, she hoped, having lived a full life in both worlds, someone else would find this journal. Another walker, confused and afraid, seeking guidance. And they would read her story, and they would understand. You can walk the forgotten roads without being forgotten yourself. You can see wonders without losing your grip on reality. You can exist between worlds if you're brave enough and careful enough and wise enough to maintain your balance. Weeks passed, then months. Mira developed a routine. 5 days a week, she worked at the bookshop, lived her ordinary life, maintained her anchors. On weekends, she would walk the roads. Short journeys, at first, never more than a day away, always carefully monitoring her map to make sure Maple Avenue remained clear. She explored the safe roads shown on the cartographer's map. She visited a marketplace where dreams were traded as currency. She walked through a forest where every tree contained a story, whispering its tale to anyone who listened. She climbed a mountain made of crystallized music, where the wind played symphonies on its ridges. Each journey added detail to her map, which grew more intricate with every walk. And each journey strengthened her abilities as a walker. She learned to navigate by feeling, to sense when a road was safe and when it led to dangerous territories. She learned to read the subtle signs, the way the light shifted when a forgotten place was near, the particular quality of the air at a crossing point. She also learned that she wasn't alone. On her travels, she occasionally met other walkers, people who, like her, had discovered the roads and learned to navigate them safely. Most were solitary, keeping to themselves, focused on their own explorations, but a few became friends, or at least friendly acquaintances. There was Marcus, a walker from England who specialized in finding forgotten libraries like the Infinite Library. He'd been walking the roads for 20 years and had visited over 100 repositories of lost knowledge. He taught Mira how to spot the signs that indicated a library was near, a particular scent in the air, like old paper and possibility. There was Yuki, a Japanese walker, who explored forgotten gardens and natural spaces. She'd been walking for only 5 years, but had an intuitive understanding of the roads that surpassed many longer-term walkers. She showed Mira how to find the subtle paths that led to places of peace and beauty rather than danger and strangeness. And then there was Chen Wei, who shared Mira's surname, though they weren't related. He was one of the oldest active walkers, having begun his journeys in the 1950s. He rarely returned to his home world anymore, existing almost entirely on the roads, his anchors so thin they were barely visible on his map. But he hadn't become one of the forgotten. Instead, he'd found a different kind of anchor, a purpose that kept him grounded. He served as a guide for lost travelers, helping those who had wandered too far find their way home. Everyone finds their own balance, Chen Wei told her one day, as they shared tea at a forgotten cafe that existed in the space between 3 different worlds. Some, like your Mr. Castellan, choose to return fully and live ordinary lives, only occasionally remembering the roads. Others, like the cartographer, commit themselves completely to the roads, maintaining just enough connection to reality to avoid being forgotten. And some, like you and me, try to walk the line between living in both worlds, belonging fully to neither, but finding meaning in that in-between space. Is that enough? Mira asked. To never fully belong anywhere? Is belonging to one place really better? Most people spend their lives constrained by a single reality, never knowing that other possibilities exist. We've been given a gift, the ability to see beyond the ordinary, to experience wonders that most humans can't even imagine. Yes, we pay a price. We're always a little bit displaced, a little bit other, but we're also free in ways that others will never be. Mira thought about that as she continued her explorations. Was she free? Or was she trapped between worlds, unable to fully commit to either? Some days it felt like freedom, the ability to walk away from her ordinary life's frustrations and lose herself in wonder. Other days it felt like a burden, the knowledge that she could never truly belong to the ordinary world, that part of her would always be looking at the shimmer of forgotten roads beneath reality's surface. It was during one of these contemplative walks that she made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been exploring a road that led to a city of mirrors, not the mirrors that showed possibilities, but mirrors that showed truths, reflections of what actually was, rather than what might be. She was examining her own reflection, noting how she'd changed since she'd first touched Thorne's map. She looked older somehow, though only 6 months had passed. Not aged exactly, but weathered. Her eyes held experiences that hadn't been there before.
And then, in the reflection, she saw something behind her. Not a person or a creature, but a pattern. A vast, intricate pattern of roads and connections, far more complex than any map she'd seen. It seemed to overlay reality itself, suggesting that the forgotten roads weren't separate from the ordinary world, but woven through it, part of its fundamental structure. She spun around, but there was nothing there, just the empty street of the mirror city. When she turned back to the mirror, the pattern was still visible in the reflection. It was as if the mirror was showing her something that existed behind reality, the hidden framework on which everything was built. She pulled out her maps and compared them to what she saw in the mirror. Her maps showed roads, yes, but they were incomplete, fragmentary. What the mirror revealed was the full network. Every road, every connection, every forgotten place, all existing simultaneously in an impossibly complex web. And at the center of the web, she saw something that made her breath catch, a nexus point where all roads eventually converged, a place marked with a symbol she'd never seen before, not on Thorne's map, not on the cartographer's, not anywhere in her travels. She had to find it, had to understand what that nexus represented. Instinct told her it was important, perhaps the most important thing she'd discovered on the roads. She took out her blank map, the one from the cartographer, and carefully sketched what she saw in the mirror. The task took hours, maybe days. Time was slippery in the mirror city.
But when she finished, she had a new map, one that showed not just the safe road she'd been walking, but the deeper structure beneath them. And now she had a new destination. The journey to the Nexus took longer than any of her previous walks. The road leading there didn't appear on either of her original maps. She could only follow it using the pattern she'd copied from the mirror. It led through territory she'd never seen, places that seemed more fundamental somehow, more real than the forgotten places she'd visited before. She walked through a space where words had physical form, where you could see sentences floating in the air and reach out to touch them, feel their meaning. She crossed the landscape of pure mathematics, where equations grew like plants and theorems crystallized into beautiful geometric shapes. She traversed a realm of archetypes, where she met the pure concepts behind things, love as an entity rather than an emotion, death as a gardener, tending the end of all things, hope as a light that burned regardless of circumstance. Each place felt ancient, fundamental. These weren't forgotten places in the same way the others had been. These were primal spaces, aspects of reality that existed before and beyond the ordinary world. The Nexus, when she finally reached it, was unlike anything she could have imagined. It existed in no space and all spaces simultaneously. From the outside, it appeared as a point of light, tiny and insignificant. But as she approached, it expanded, or she shrank, or both, until she was standing in a vast chamber that seemed to contain the entire multiverse. Roads extended in every direction, millions of them, billions, more than she could comprehend. They branched and merged and twisted through dimensions she had no names for. And at the center of the web, where all roads eventually converged, stood a figure. At first, she thought it was the cartographer, but as she drew closer, she realized it was someone or something else entirely. The figure was humanoid but constantly shifting, as if it couldn't decide what form to take. Sometimes it looked male, sometimes female, sometimes neither or both. Its features cycled through every race and age, as if it were simultaneously everyone and no one. "Welcome, Walker," the figure said, its voice echoing with harmonics that seemed to come from multiple throats. "I am the threshold, the boundary between what is and what might be, the space through which all possibilities must pass to become real." The figure gestured, and the roads around them pulsed with light. "These are not forgotten roads. That is what the cartographer calls them, but that is not what they truly are. They are possibility roads, pathways between different states of reality. What you call forgotten places are simply possibilities that didn't quite become real in your world, but might have in others." Then all of this, the Mira City, the infinite library, everything I've seen, these are possible worlds? More than that. They are the spaces between worlds, the places where reality is still fluid, still deciding what to be. Your world, the one you call ordinary, is simply one possibility that solidified, became fixed. But beneath it, around it, through it, the possibility roads still run. And those with the gift, those like you, can walk them. Why? What's the purpose? There is no purpose. Or rather, the purpose is whatever you make of it. The threshold shifted form again, becoming an old woman, then a young child, then something in between. You are here because you sought to understand. That is enough. Understanding is its own purpose. Mira looked around at the impossible architecture of the Nexus, at the road stretching away to infinity. The cartographer has been mapping these roads for centuries. Is that his purpose? To document all of this? The cartographer seeks to impose order on chaos, to make sense of the infinite. That is his purpose, his anchor. Others have different purposes. The keeper maintains safe crossings. Chen Wei guides lost travelers. And you are still discovering your purpose. That is why you came here to the Nexus. You wanted to see the whole pattern, to understand your place within it. What is my place?
That is for you to decide. You are a walker, yes, but what kind of walker? One who explores for the joy of discovery, like many of your fellows? One who seeks knowledge, like the scholars who visit the infinite library? One who helps others, like Chen Wei? Or something else entirely? Mira thought about that. She thought about why she'd first stepped onto the Forgotten Roads, about what had driven her to keep walking despite the danger. It wasn't just curiosity, though that was part of it. It wasn't just escape from her ordinary life, though that too played a role. I think, she said slowly, I want to help people understand that reality is bigger than they think, that there are possibilities beyond what they can see. Not by taking them onto the roads, that would be dangerous for most people, but by, I don't know, showing them that wonder still exists, that the ordinary world contains extraordinary things if you know how to look. The threshold smiled, an expression that crossed all its shifting faces simultaneously. Ah, you would be a bridge, then, not fully of the ordinary world, not fully of the roads, but existing between and translating one to the other. That is a rare purpose and a valuable one. How do I do that? How do I show people wonder without showing them the roads? That you must discover yourself, but I will give you a gift to aid you. The threshold reached out, and reality seemed to bend around its hand. When it opened its palm, it held a small object, a pen, or perhaps a compass, or perhaps both at once, shifting between forms. This will help you create your own maps, maps that show not the roads themselves, but the possibilities they represent, maps that hint at wonder without revealing too much. Use it wisely. Mira took the object, feeling its weight change in her hand as it shifted forms. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. This gift comes with a responsibility. By accepting it, you become a cartographer in your own right, not of forgotten places, but of possibility itself. You will show others the way to wonder, and some will walk paths that lead them astray. Some will be changed by what you show them, and not always for the better. Can you bear that responsibility? Mira thought about Professor Thorne, who had walked too far and died with red dust on his hands. She thought about Mr. Castellan, who had walked for 3 years and merely lost himself. She thought about all the walkers she'd met who existed on the knife's edge between worlds. But she also thought about the wonder she'd seen, the impossible beauty of the forgotten places, the joy of discovery, the expansion of understanding, the transcendence of seeing beyond the ordinary. Wasn't that worth sharing, even at risk? Yes, she said, I can bear it. The journey back from the Nexus was instantaneous and eternal. One moment she was in that impossible space where all roads met. The next, she was standing on Maple Avenue in the gray light of early morning. No time had passed in her world. It was the same day she'd left, the same hour even. But she had changed. She could feel it, a fundamental shift in her perception. The ordinary world looked different now, not less real, but more layered. She could see the possibility roads running beneath everything, connecting not just locations, but states of being, choices, moments. The world was not fixed and solid as she'd always believed, but fluid,
constantly shifting between what was and what might be. And in her hand, the gift from the threshold had settled into its final form, a pen that could draw on any surface, creating maps that showed possibility itself. She went home, slept, and the next day returned to work. But something had shifted in her relationship with the bookshop. It was no longer just a job, a way to pay rent. It was an opportunity. "Mr. Castellan," she said during a lull in customers, "I want to create something, a section of the shop dedicated to maps, to exploration, to the idea that there's more to the world than what we can see. Not occult books, we have enough of those, but maps that inspire wonder, that make people want to explore, that hint at possibilities." Mr. Castellan studied her with his shrewd old eyes. "You went further on the roads, didn't you? Saw something that changed you." "Yes. I reached the nexus, met the threshold, and I realized that my purpose isn't just to walk the roads myself, but to help others see the wonder that exists everywhere, not just in forgotten places. And you think maps can do that?" "I know they can. Maps are promises, Mr. Castellan, promises of somewhere else, somewhere interesting, somewhere that matters. Even maps of ordinary places contain wonder if you know how to read them. And if I can create maps that enhance that show the possibility in the everyday, maybe I can give people a taste of what the roads offer without leading them into danger." Mr. Castellan was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "There's a space on the second floor, a corner by the window. It's been used for storage for years, but it could be cleared out. Make it yours. Create your maps, your section. Show people wonder. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Remember your anchors. Remember Maple Avenue. The Nexus may have changed you, but you're still Mira Chen of this world. Don't forget that in your eagerness to show others possibility." "I won't. That's why I came back." Over the following months, Mira transformed the corner of the second floor into something special. She filled it with maps, antique maps from the shop's collection, modern maps she acquired from various sources, and maps that she created herself using the pen from the threshold. Her maps were unlike anything she'd seen before. They showed ordinary locations, cities, countries, neighborhoods, but with layers of meaning embedded in them. A map of her city that also showed the dreams people had while living there. A map of the United States that revealed the hopes and fears associated with each region. A map of the world that displayed not just geography, but possibility, showing where people's roads might lead them if they dared to explore. She didn't show the forgotten roads themselves. That would be too dangerous. But her maps hinted at them, suggested them, made people aware that there was more to reality than what they could see on the surface. The section became popular. People came specifically to see her maps, to run their fingers along the lines she had drawn, to dream about the places they represented. Some bought them to hang on their walls. Others simply sat and studied them, finding meaning in the layers she had embedded. A few, a very few, saw more. Their eyes would widen as they traced certain paths on her maps, as if they were perceiving something beyond what was visible. These were the ones with the gift, the potential walkers who hadn't yet discovered the roads. Mira would watch them carefully, and if they seemed ready, if they seemed strong enough, she would quietly slip them a note with instructions on how to find the old storage room on the third floor where Thorne's original map still lay hidden. Most never followed up, but a few did, and those few became part of the small community of walkers, joining the ancient tradition of exploring the roads between worlds. Mira continued to walk the roads herself, but more carefully now, always maintaining her anchors. She explored on weekends, visited her walker friends, saw wonders that defied description. But she always came back. Maple Avenue remained clear on her map, the oak tree solid and present, her apartment a beacon calling her home. She wrote about her experiences in Mr. Castellan's journal, adding to the record of walkers who had come before. She documented the places she'd seen, the beings she'd met, the lessons she'd learned. It became a comprehensive guide for future walkers, a warning and an invitation in equal measure. Years passed. The bookshop thrived, her map section becoming its most popular feature. She helped dozens of people find the wonder they'd been seeking, whether that meant stepping onto the forgotten roads or simply opening their eyes to the extraordinary in the ordinary. She watched Mr. Castellan grow older, his health declining. On his deathbed, he called her to his side. "The shop is yours," he whispered, his voice weak but determined. "I've left it to you in my will. You're the only one who truly understands what it's for, not just selling books, but preserving knowledge, helping seekers find what they need." "Mr. Castellan, I don't know if I can—" "You can. You've already been doing it for years. You're a better keeper of this place than I ever was." He squeezed her hand. "And Mira, don't stop walking. Don't let responsibility chain you to one world the way I did. You've found the balance. Keep it." He died that night, peacefully, his anchors finally released. At his funeral, Mira met his wife, Mary, elderly now, but still sharp-eyed and kind. They talked for hours about Mr. Castellan's time on the roads, about the man he'd been before he'd made his choice to return permanently. "He never regretted coming back," Mary told her, "but I think he always wondered what he might have seen if he'd walked further. You're doing what he couldn't, living in both worlds. He admired that about you. I'm only able to do it because of what he taught me. He showed me how to maintain anchors, how to remember why ordinary life matters, even when you've seen the extraordinary." Mary smiled. "Then his legacy lives on. That's all any of us can hope for." 10 years after she'd first touched Professor Thorne's map, Mira sat in what was now her office in the bookshop, studying a new map she was creating. This one showed the entire network of possibility roads as she understood them. Not the complete pattern she'd glimpsed at the Nexus, but a more accessible version, one that human minds could comprehend. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the figure who entered her office until he spoke. "Beautiful work. You've truly become a cartographer in your own right." She looked up and saw him, the cartographer himself, looking exactly as he had when she'd met him in his tower years ago. But there was something different about him now, a lightness she hadn't seen before. "You came here," she said, surprised. "To my world, to the ordinary world." "Yes, it's been a long time since I walked the streets of a fixed reality, decades, perhaps longer." He moved to the window, looking out at Maple Avenue. "But I felt a pull, a sense that something important was happening here, and then I felt it, the resonance of another cartographer, creating maps that bridge worlds. I'm not a cartographer like you. I don't map the roads themselves. No, you map something more important. You map the possibility that the roads represent, the wonder they contain without revealing too much. It's a delicate balance, and you've mastered it." He turned back to her, smiling. "I'm impressed and grateful. You're doing what I could never do, helping people see wonder while keeping them safe from its more dangerous aspects. I learned from the best, from you, from Mr. Castellan, from Chen Wei and the others, and from yourself. Don't diminish your achievement." He moved closer to the map she was working on, studying it carefully. "You've seen the Nexus, met the threshold. That makes you one of perhaps 5 living walkers who've reached that far. Most never make it because they lack the courage or because they become forgotten before they find it." "Why did the threshold allow me to find it? What made me different?" your question. You weren't seeking power or escape or transcendence. You were seeking understanding. Understanding of yourself, of your place in the pattern. The threshold responds to that kind of seeking. It shows itself to those who truly want to understand rather than simply experience. Mira thought about that journey, about the revelation of standing in that impossible space where all roads met. It changed me, made me see that the roads aren't separate from ordinary reality, but woven through it, that possibility is everywhere, not just in forgotten places. Yes, and that's the truth that most people need to understand. Not the roads themselves, which can be dangerous, but what they represent, that reality is not fixed, that possibilities exist beyond what we can immediately see, that wonder is always present if we know how to look. The cartographer pulled up a chair and sat across from her. I came here for another reason, beyond simple congratulation. I want to make you an offer. What kind of offer? A collaboration. You've been mapping the roads from the perspective of the ordinary world, showing how possibility intersects with daily life. I've been mapping them from the other direction, documenting the forgotten places themselves. Together, we could create something unprecedented, a complete map that shows both perspectives, the roads as they exist in all their layered complexity. That would take years, decades maybe. Yes, but we have time. You've learned to maintain your anchors while walking extensively. You could increase your time on the roads without losing yourself. And I've decided it's time for me to strengthen my own connection to ordinary reality. Too long I've existed between worlds without truly belonging to any. Perhaps it's time to change that. Mira felt a surge of excitement at the prospect. A complete map of the possibility roads, showing both the wonders they contain and the ways they intersected with ordinary life. It would be the ultimate guide for walkers and the ultimate testament to the layered nature of reality. I'll do it, she said, on one condition, which is, we base ourselves here, in this world, in this city. You strengthen your anchors while we work, and I maintain mine. We create the map from a foundation in ordinary reality, not from the roads themselves. The cartographer considered this, then nodded. Agreed. It will be good to have a home again, a place to return to. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Then welcome to Maple Avenue, Mira said, smiling. Welcome home. 25 years after Mira first touched Professor Thorne's map, she stood on Maple Avenue in the early morning light. She was 57 now, her hair showing streaks of gray, her face lined with years of experience. But her eyes were still sharp, still filled with the wonder of someone who had seen impossible things and never forgotten them. The bookshop behind her was thriving. It had become legendary in certain circles, a place where seekers could find guidance, where walkers could find community, where ordinary people could catch glimpses of the extraordinary that existed just beneath the surface of reality. The cartographer stood beside her, looking not a day older than when she'd first met him in his tower. Time touched walkers differently, she'd learned. Their extensive travels through the roads seemed to slow their aging, or perhaps time simply meant less when you spent so much of it in places where it flowed strangely. Are you ready? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be. They were about to embark on a new journey, not to explore forgotten places, but to visit other cities, other communities of walkers scattered around the world. To share their complete map, to teach what they learned about maintaining balance, to help strengthen the network of people who walked between worlds. It would be a long journey, years perhaps, but Mira wasn't afraid. Her anchors were strong. Maple Avenue was clear on her map, the oak tree rendered in perfect detail, her apartment waiting for her return. She could walk for years and still find her way back. Because that was the secret she'd finally understood. The secret that Professor Thorne had never grasped, that had nearly consumed the cartographer before he'd learned it, that every walker had to discover for themselves. The roads were not an escape from ordinary life. They were a complement to it. The wonder of the forgotten places made you appreciate the wonder of the ordinary world, and the solid reality of home made it possible to explore the fluid possibilities of the roads without losing yourself in them. You needed both, the extraordinary and the ordinary, the impossible and the everyday, the roads and the home you returned to. In the balance between them, you found not just survival, but meaning. A young woman approached them on the street, one of Mira's recent students, a new walker who discovered the roads only 6 months ago. She held a map Mira had created for her, showing the safe paths she could walk from her own neighborhood. "I wanted to thank you," the young woman said, "before you leave, for showing me that wonder exists, that reality is bigger than I thought, and for teaching me how to explore it safely." "Remember your anchors," Mira told her, the same advice she'd received from Mr. Castellan all those years ago. "No matter how far you walk, no matter what wonders you see, remember the ordinary world. Remember the people and places that made you who you are. That's what keeps you from becoming forgotten." "I will, I promise." The young woman walked away, and Mira watched her go with a sense of satisfaction. Another walker safely guided, another person learning to balance between worlds. It was good work, important work, and she was grateful to be able to do it. "Shall we?" the cartographer asked, gesturing to the road that only they could see, the red path that ran down Maple Avenue and led to destinations unknown. Mira took one last look at her apartment building, at the oak tree, at the familiar street that had been her anchor for so many years. Then she smiled and stepped onto the road. "Let's walk." And together, the two cartographers set off down the forgotten road, carrying their maps and their knowledge, their anchors strong and their spirits free. Behind them, Maple Avenue continued its ordinary existence, unaware of the extraordinary paths that ran beneath its surface. And in the bookshop, in the locked room on the 3rd floor, the complete map waited, ready to reveal itself to the next seeker, the next walker, the next person who needed to know that reality was bigger, stranger, and more wonderful than they ever imagined. The roads would always be there, invisible to most, but present nonetheless, connecting forgotten places to each other and to the ordinary world, offering wonder to those brave enough to walk them and wise enough to come back. And somewhere, in a place between all places, the threshold smiled. Another generation of walkers was finding their way, maintaining the delicate balance between what was and what might be. The roads would continue, would endure, would forever offer possibilities to those who knew how to see them. The pattern held, the balance remained, and the forgotten roads wound on, through the margins of reality, waiting for the next traveler to take that first brave step into wonder.